All right, if I can have your attention, please. It's now my privilege to bring to you Miss Coco Bradley and her paper, Searching for Salvation.
Thank you, Mr. H. Do all men universally desire salvation? Or do men desire happiness, riches, pleasures, and honors, and can be satisfied with their obtainment? Everyday life is filled with instances where men strive to obtain for themselves worldly happiness. As these desires are avidly sought, men commonly believe these are necessary to bring about contentment. However, do these desires bring man sincere satisfaction? Or can contentment only be found in greater pursuits beyond this earthly life, such as the perfection of man, his nature, and the world around him? An imaginary, beautiful garden presents one with a delightful vision of eye-catching flowers, luscious green trees of all kinds, a soft breeze, butterflies that flutter to and fro, and birds soaring with the blue sky as their playground. If one stops and listens, the sound of nature will fill his ears. Leaves rustling from the breeze, and the pleasant chirping of birds, all singing a sweet melody. Nature, the lovely creation that God brought to life, fills man's senses. Eden, the symbol of perfection, where God, man, and nature all lived in harmony. God said, "Let us make man in our own image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth." God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female, he created them. Man was created in a perfect state under God, in his image, and to rule, cultivate, and enjoy his creation. However, man was also created with a free will that would give him the ability to leave this beautiful picture, if he so chooses. Amidst this beauty and perfection, God gave man only one commandment to obey, as he said, "From any tree of the garden you may eat freely, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day that you eat from it, you shall surely die." Being created with a free will, it was up to Adam and Eve to choose how they wanted to live. As the story goes, Satan, the crafty serpent, enticed Eve with the benefits of godlike knowledge of good and evil. He slyly claimed that from eating the fruit, Eve would not die as what was told, but she would be like God and obtain knowledge of both good and evil. The serpent said, "For God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil." This offer was tempting, and Eve chose to eat of the forbidden tree, for this new vision of her exalted state would appear to improve on her current condition. Adam, however, was not deceived. He knew what God had said, but rather chose to partake of the delicious fruit as it was offered to him by his wife. This choice gained Adam and Eve the knowledge of good, and with it, they also became acquainted with evil, which cost them their previous state of perfection and likeness of God. Adam and Eve were no longer in God's image, but became corrupted with sin, and are therefore condemned to live and die in this imperfect state. This consequential event illustrates two reasons why all men universally strive to obtain salvation. Man's nature, since Adam and Eve ate of the tree, is imperfect, and hence continually full of sin. Man's nature before his fall was originally perfect, in the greatness of God's image, of which all men still bear the memory, though faint. After their transgression, Adam and Eve, in their imperfect nature, bore many children as God commanded. These children were not born perfect as Adam and Eve once were, but were copies of two fallen natures. Thus Coco own. From a bad crow, a bad egg. As the population continued, no man was born perfect, but had inherited the transgression of their ancestors, compounding the sins such as envy, wrathfulness, slothfulness, covetousness, gluttony, lust, and pride, the last being the most common and grievous. For every man, however laudably he lives, yet yields in some point to the lust of the flesh. Though he does not fall into gross enormity of wickedness, and abandoned viciousness, and abominable profanity, yet he slips into some sin, either rarely so, or much the more frequently as the sins seem of less account. Resulting from this fall, all men now universally strive to regain their former perfection, and desire to better themselves, seeking what will improve on their deficient condition. Naturally, man does not look at the problems he has, and is satisfied with them. These imperfections bring discomfort to one's mind, and self-image, and bruise his pride. Being unable to cure death, wretchedness, and ignorance, men have decided, in order to be happy, not to think about such things. Men always strive for correcting and perfecting their faults, or they ignore and hide from them, pursuing every sort of mind-numbing activity or substance as a distraction. However, even here, men often think they are helping or protecting themselves by avoiding the uncomfortable problems that they will inevitably experience. From man's subconscious knowledge of his former exalted state, along with the uncomfortable conscious knowledge of his current sinful and imperfect condition, men have an innate desire to regain his former perfection and greatness. Universally, all men are not satisfied with their present condition. They desire something that will improve their life and fill their needs, expecting that it would bring them happiness, contentment, and rest. Though happiness is sought, it is merely an inadequate and temporary prize compared to the glory that man enjoyed in perfection, being in the image of God. For many men gain an object that they think would make them happy, only to become again unsatisfied with their life. These earthly pursuits only satisfy the current feeling and temporarily bring happiness. These pursuits do not fulfill man's deepest desires because they do not cure the imperfections of his nature, inherited from his ancestors and compounded by his own actions. The short-lived moments of happiness do not reestablish man into his former exalted state. Therefore, man cannot restore himself into the greatness he once enjoyed. Augustine understood that all men have an innate desire for happiness. He shows us simply by portraying that happiness is not a preference that some men desire to have and others do not, such as hobbies. If two men are asked whether they want to serve as soldiers, it may be well that one of them will reply that he wants to, while the other will reply that he does not. However, if they are asked whether they want to be happy, both will say immediately and without hesitation that they want to. Happiness and the pursuit of happiness are not subjective, but are objective. Happiness is not based on personal feelings, opinions, or predilections, but is an innate call within every man's heart to return to the original state he was created in. Aristotle, one of the founding philosophers, simplifies the same concept of man's natural desire for happiness, saying that in any action or pursuit, all men strive for what is good. Every art and every inquiry, and similarly every action and pursuit, is thought to aim at some good, and for this reason the good has been rightly been declared to be that which all things aim. This statement, however, can seem irrational when one thinks of an evil man's intentions. Surely the pursuits of a wicked man who steal, cheat, commit adultery, or kill are not good. No, pursuits such as these are not morally good and are considered evil. However, as these pursuits may not be morally good, they often appear beneficial to an evil person, filling his immediate desires. Most men, and men of the most vulgar type, seem to identify the good or happiness with pleasure. All men have a different view of what is good to them. Obviously, men of poor morals have a different perception of what is good compared to those with virtuous morals. However, the underlying pursuit of each man is the same: a desire for what is good for themselves and what will benefit them, rather than what would bring them pain and suffering. Therefore, all men, no matter who they are or their moral condition, naturally aim for some ideal or better state of being, and are not content to remain as they are. Men seek to escape from their present circumstances and strive for what they perceive as good, whether knowingly or unknowingly, desiring to reach their former exalted and perfect state in God's likeness. But if man's desires cannot be satisfied by his own efforts and earthly pursuits, then the goal that men strive after is a deeper and more significant issue than only obtaining happiness. It is a goal of obtaining salvation. Men, in their pride, think they are capable of reacquiring that lost perfection. Taking matters into their own hands, they strive to prove their merit in various ways that they think will reestablish them in good standing with God or among men, thus saving them from whatever fate they think awaits one who remains stuck, wallowing in their corrupt nature. But they wish to be life, not in the Lord, but in themselves, and they think the soul's nature to be that which God is. Thus they are made into a deeper darkness. Adam and Eve demonstrate how powerful the inherent imprint of God is upon his creation. Though being in a perfectly created state, they still desire to be even more like God. The desire of men to seek happiness, perfection, and ultimately salvation is deep within his being. This desire is in his original created state and also remains in his fallen nature and is passed on through him generationally. In Homer's Iliad, Achilles could not accept the wealthy offer of Agamemnon, the selfish king who stole his prize, the beautiful Briseis, from him. Even with Briseis being offered back to Achilles' possession, he could not be happy. Achilles was filled with anger, as he could not serve under an evil and selfish king such as Agamemnon. But my heart still heaves with rage whenever I call to mind that arrogance of his, how he mortified me right in front of the Argives, that son of Atreus treating me like some vagabond, like some outcast stripped of all my rights. When Achilles' beloved friend, Patroclus, was killed in battle under the command of King Agamemnon, Achilles' previous disdain to serve under his king was replaced by uncontrollable rage. The pains of loss and injustice demanded action, for his soul was in imminent need of restitution. Achilles flamed with wrath at the injustice, and to satisfy his soul, acts of God were sought and acted out to right the wrongs, recovering what was lost, executing judgments, enforcing punishments, and regaining one's former exalted position. Achilles' dire situation could not be ignored, for no man would willingly accept injustice, and no man would give into death without a fight. Achilles strove after vindication as he adamantly proclaimed, "I'll lie in peace once I've gone down to death, but now, for the moment, let me seize great glory." Achilles took matters into his own hands to acquire himself restitution, and fighting for revenge and glory was his means of relieving his distressful condition. However, does this glory bring Achilles peace, rest, happiness, or complete satisfaction from the discontent he suffered in life? In the Odyssey, Odysseus goes down to Hades, the land of the shades, those who were victim to inevitable death. As he converses with the numerous shades, Odysseus meets Achilles, and seeing his high rank in Hades amongst the other shades, begins to praise him in his glorious life. We ranked you with the immortals in your lifetime, we Argives did, and here your power is royal among the dead men shades. Think then, Achilles, you do not be so pained by death. But Achilles had realized that this exalted ideal of glory could not bring about salvation or the happiness he yearned to obtain. Better I say to break sod as a farmhand for some poor countryman on iron rations than to lord over all the exhausted dead. Even with the glory he earned in his lifetime, and the glory he had in Hades amongst the shades, Achilles was unhappy and stuck to remain eternally unsatisfied. Julius Caesar, as demonstrated in Plutarch's Lives, was ambitious for honor and fame. Along with his bravery, Caesar used his natural eloquence in speech and generosity to increase his political influence and gain the favor of the most powerful men in Rome. Through his drive and courage, Caesar conquered many nations on his journey to greatness. Caesar achieved his ambitions and became the most powerful man the world had known. But Julius Caesar had become well known and respected long before he became Rome's highest ruler. Why does a man such as he need to continue striving for further honors and powers? Why does a man not rest in what he is? Why is man not satisfied if he improves and gains a little bit more than what he previously had? Do you think, said he, I have not just cause to weep whenever I consider that Alexander, at my age, had conquered so many nations, and I have all this time done nothing that is memorable? Though Caesar gained more glory, honor, power, wealth, and fame than any other man of his time, he was still not content. Caesar was born to do great things, and had a passion after honor, and the many noble exploits he had done did not now serve as an inducement to him to sit still and reap the fruits of his past labors, but were incentives and encouragements to go on, and raise in him ideas of still greater actions and a desire of new glory, as if the present were all spent. What else is needed to make man content and satisfied with his life? Caesar's life is one that exemplifies a man's deepest desires. Desires that are beyond the reach of happiness, glory, wealth, and honor. Desires that cannot be satisfied by even the most powerful ruler of the earth, risking his life and achieving his dreams. What is left to satisfy man beyond greatness, fame, honor, and glory? Perfection? Godlike powers? Love? Handsome Paris in Homer's Iliad, from his imperfect nature, cultivated sins such as envy, lust, and pride. Maybe the lack of self-confidence or self-worth drove his pursuits of salvation through attention and love. However, just as any man would strive to obtain happiness from whatever he feels was lacking, Paris followed the wide and easy path of trying to gain satisfaction by the attainment of temporary sensual pleasures. Paris, known to be the most handsome man in all of Troy, sought to indulge himself with the most beautiful woman, Helen. The irresistible desire to obtain this ideal of love between the most handsome and the most beautiful needed to be achieved, no matter what the means. Paris, responding to this aspiration, stole Helen from whom she was properly wed, obtaining an end, a salvation for his desperate and lonely soul, that he thought would justify the means. Never have longing for you overwhelmed me so, no, not even then, I tell you, that the first time I swept you up from the lovely hills of Lacedaemon, sailed you off and away in the racing deep-sea ships, and we went locked in love on the rocky island. That was nothing for how I hunger for you now. Irresistible longing lays me low. Perfection is an unavoidable craving in the hearts of all men. However, the desire for perfection, intended to lead to salvation and God's redemption, is easily altered and misled by the strong temptations of human sin. Paris was infatuated with Helen, and his desire was a misleading pleasure encouraged by his sins of lust that ultimately lacked in true satisfaction. A relationship pursued solely through man's emotions and pleasures is miserably inadequate to bring about genuine happiness. Paris may have obtained Helen and satisfied his longings, but he did not find sincere contentment in his life. Helen eventually came to disdain him and the act of unfaithfulness he created for her. More importantly, Paris's imperfect nature remained, and the search to alleviate his miserable soul would continue. Man, in his belief that he's assisting in bringing about his happiness, often traps himself in a constant state of unsatisfied activity, jumping from one pursuit to another.
Don't you know where it's coming from?
It's coming from the TV. DM. Oh, sorry. All right. Looks like we have somebody with the microphone on. And, oh, yes, Diego, please make sure you keep your microphone off. I just turned it off. Thank you. Excuse us for the interruption, Coco.
In man's original greatness and brokenness, men have become confused in his journey to obtain his end goal. Men seek rest and salvation by perpetual activity, some trivial but often with honorable pursuits, to better themselves in their condition. Some men run from their miseries, wallowing in addictions, while others seek constant improvements and achievements to overcome their miseries, the latter being a most commonly held view that most people think is enough for man's salvation. But in reality, the pursuit of constant improvement is a contradiction to reason. This method of attaining happiness is not restful, but wearisome, for one has to constantly run to the next and latest idea for self-improvement, all without end. However, most men are caught somewhere in the middle, not hiding from their problems and not blindly chasing the impossible, but are willfully distracting themselves with anything that will take their mind off their hopeless condition. They have a secret instinct driving them to seek eternal diversion and occupation, and this is the result of their constant sense of wretchedness. They have another secret instinct left over from the greatness of our original nature, telling them that the only true happiness lies in rest and not in excitement. These two contrary instincts give rise to a confused plan buried out of sight in the depths of their soul, which leads them to seek rest by way of activity, and always to imagine that the satisfaction that they miss will come to them once they've overcome certain obvious difficulties and can open the door to welcome rest. The source of one's problems lies in the imperfection left from the transgression of man falling out of his created image of God's likeness. This broken state is a deficiency so deep within the soul, it cannot be satisfied by obtaining worldly satisfactions, and cannot be obtained by man's ideas and forms of salvation. But this concept does not keep man from grasping for his salvation, though he is grasping at the wind. A man in the pursuit of false salvation can create more problems for himself than the wearisome state he's already stuck in. In Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, two brave knights, Palamon and Arcady, were captured and imprisoned in the tower of Duke Theseus after a brutal and long war. In the unfortunate state of imprisonment, the two knights were friends, blood-sworn cousins, and had each other as delightful company to live the remainder of their years with. However, one day, as they glared at their tower, Palamon and Arcady caught sight of a woman, Emily, the lovely daughter of the Duke. Her beauty struck them senseless, and from the first sight, both knights loved her beyond the capacity of reasoning. The beauty of one woman brought about an uncontrollable desire in both men, an intense strife between these two blood-sworn cousins. Their lives instantly changed, as Palamon and Arcady bristled with jealousy and hate for each other, and their infatuation developed into the passion to acquire this woman to be their own. Let it be death for you or death for me. You shall not love my lady Emily. I, no one else, will love her. To live without Emily became unbearable, and no matter what situation, the pursuit to attain her would be the only justifiable pursuit to save Palamon and Arcady from their distresses. Arcady, soon after, was released from captivity, but on terms that he should never be seen in the Duke's country, otherwise he would be executed. Palamon, on the other hand, was forever imprisoned, but could see lovely Emily from his tower. Palamon the Pale lies there condemned to perpetual jail, chained up in fetters till his dying breath. Arcida is exiled on pain of death, forever from the long-desired shores where lived a lady he will see no more. Both knights were ensnared with pains, and their pain could not be ignored. Palamon and Arcady had to take action, and were motivated to attain satisfaction no matter what it would cost them. Arcady, disguising himself, worked for the Duke as a personal and chamber squire within the kingdom. Palamon escaped the prison tower to obtain his freedom and freely pursue Emily. Love and happiness is a simple way to describe what these two men were after. Palamon and Arcady devoted all of themselves to obtain Emily, as she would have ideally restored them to a life of bliss and perfection, a desire derived from man's created state. But as this salvation was adamantly fought for, Palamon and Arcady's friendship with each other fell apart. When a man proposes a sort of alternate salvation, putting into a position an object of devotion that should only be given to God, there'll be no end to satisfying this pursuit. A false and idolized salvation will rather produce a life of misery and unhappiness, and ultimately a life opposite to salvation itself. We run heedlessly into the abyss after putting something in front of us to stop us from seeing it. As men devote themselves to obtain false salvations, they will acquire a life filled with activity, as they will only spend their time satisfying fleeting desires and emotions. Men will also acquire a life of eternal suffering, apart from God, as they have not fixed the source of their imperfections, and have been restored to the perfect state they once enjoyed. Men will also acquire a life of eternal suffering apart from God, as they have not fixed the source of their imperfections, and have been restored to the perfect state they once were created in the image of God. Through the perfect state man was created, in God's image, and the current wretchedness he is stuck in, from the fall of Adam and Eve, all men universally have a desire to escape this mire and regain what was lost. To have lost being in God's image, perfect in one's nature, and in harmony with all that is right and good, it is not a trivial matter, but is a scar left on every man since his creation. Men of either strong morals or of wicked character both inherently know that they cannot rest in this fallen, imperfect world, and they attempt to better their condition. However, men go astray in their pursuits to better themselves. The worldly pursuits of wealth, honor, glory, or love are valuable and noble goals, but they all fall short in bringing about contentment. As has been shown, men will act in a self-abandoning manner when pursuing these ideals. But contentment will only come through a passionate and self-abandoning devotion to regaining and obtaining their original created state of perfection in God's image. This restoration of one's corrupted nature cannot be found in earthly virtues, but lies beyond man's abilities and can only be accomplished by God. Therefore, man's universal desire to escape his wretchedness and better himself is ultimately a desire for salvation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradley. It's not really a topic that you bring up in your paper, but it certainly leads into it, and that is the attitude of those who have found salvation to these worldly pursuits. You've talked about how oftentimes our worldly pursuits are a sort of substitute or sort of stand-in for actually seeking salvation. All the things of the world that we look at, that we strive after, are in a sense a sort of substitute for that true salvation we'll be finding in God. Once one does embrace salvation as found in God, how does that affect one's attitude towards those pursuits? Pursuing wealth, pursuing excellence, pursuing strength, pursuing all the activities of the world. If one is truly satisfied in the salvation that God brings, does that mean that one should perhaps live a life of something like a monk, where you pull yourself away from all of those pursuits? You don't have possessions, you don't have family, you don't build yourself a place to dwell. You might live in a cave and pull yourself away from all of that worldly pursuit. Would that help, or would that even aid towards one's laying hold of that spiritual salvation more earnestly?
I would say, once you made your peace with God and you obtained salvation in God, all those things of love and glory and wealth are put in perspective, in their context. Your focus is more on God, but I don't think you have to pursue a life like monks, only focused on that, because you still live in this world and have worldly. I think it's necessary to strive after earthly pursuits, such as honor and glory and love and righteousness, and live your life in those ways, and be a good picture for other people to come, so they know what those look like on a Christian and one who believes in God.
Well, you brought up that nice little example of Julius Caesar reading the stories of Alexander the Great and sitting there weeping over the fact that Caesar at 32 had conquered most of France, but Alexander the Great by that age had conquered most of the known world. And so Caesar reads that, and he finds himself in a sort of dissatisfaction of ambition. And do you read that and say, well, if he was a Christian, he would have never felt that way. That's so silly. And, I think, well, okay, so here I've been teaching 26, 27 years. I've taught about 1,000 students, but shame on me, it hasn't been 2,000. Where is, that sort of aggression and, pursuing life aggressively and trying to lay hold of, you might say, worldly ambitions. Is that something that is kind of put aside for a Christian, or could being a Christian make one even more aggressive towards just kind of the pursuit of worldly ends?
I don't think the desire to obtain salvation is besides or obtain some type of happiness or something, some greatness is beyond Christians. I think every man has the desire to obtain those things and search for it often in human worldly ways. And I think even if they are Christian, they will search for some type of happiness in their life, even though they made their peace with God. It's just a natural desire in man from the memory of how he was created. And he's not in that perfect image anymore, so he will inherently have that desire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember a story, somebody had gone to visit Jerusalem, and it was going on the streets of Jerusalem. There was a lot of Hasidic Jews that were in their full business attire with their briefcases running through the streets. And just being somewhat stunned at that. But these Jews, that very aggressive businessmen, when they went from place to place, walking was just not good enough. They were running, and I thought, wow, that's an aggressive businessman. All right, you just run everywhere. And but to say, well, you look at that, and you say, obviously that person does not have contentment in God. Should a Christian be a sort of running person?
I don't think it's bad to run in the right direction. If you're running towards God, I don't think it's bad. Yeah, I don't think it's bad to want to desire more knowledge of God. I think that's very beneficial.
I'm being a little bit more practical, though. I mean, just in making business deals, being a businessman, and wanting to say, you know what, if I'm going to be a businessman, God's given me this to do, I am going to just get out there and do every last deal I can. And I'm not going to be content until I double my monthly sales. And I want to be that aggressive in what I do. Is that really, would you say that, you saw somebody like that, you say, you know what, that guy's just not found his contentment in God yet.
I would say so. You have to make your peace with God before. It's important to make your peace with God first. And I would say, since it's an inevitable desire for men to still seek some happiness, as long as you've made your peace with God, then you won't be faced with him at Judgment Day without any answer. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so coming back to the general question again, is finding your peace with God make you more or less content? Whoops, I thought I could finish that sentence. I guess I'm thinking of the examples. There's so many examples of kind of human excellence. People who do things, very aggressive businessmen, or very aggressive in sports, or really high-powered musician, or all these things people can pursue in a way that's very aggressive and very much high-powered roller hockey player. All these things that people pursue. And when you become a Christian, is your pursuit of all of those things going to become, is contentment in God make your pursuit of all of those things more or less aggressive?
I'd say less aggressive, because salvation found in God's redemption I would say it makes it less aggressive, because man has made their peace with God, and they do receive full contentment, because they are now going to be restored back to the image of God. What is great, what is right, love, all the attributes of God, they will now obtain, and their sins will be wiped away. So I'd say the importance would be those worldly things, the worldly pursuits and drives won't be as important anymore.
Okay, to put it in a more particular instance, someone's at the roller hockey rink and watching Coco play roller hockey, and say, wow, Coco, she is a real hot shot. What is the more reasonable, what response do you think is more reasonable? Coco, what a roller hockey hotshot. Must not be a Christian. Or Coco, what a hotshot. She must be a Christian.
It would be more reasonable to say that, like, from appearance, it would be more reasonable to say that she's not a Christian, because that you're only focusing on that one instance where you see me. But if you see me in my daily life, and throughout life, you would see my actions and would say that I'm a Christian, because I have made my peace with God, and it shows in my life.
All right, so excellence in a particular activity is probably evidence against rather than evidence for one's fervent piety of God.
Well, I think you just need to look at a bigger picture. You can't just judge it off of one little instance of her life.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'd like to go to another quote here. This is towards the end. You said, "To be in God's image, perfect in one's nature and in harmony with all that is right and good, is not a trivial matter, but is a scar left on every man since his creation." Do you believe, or could you explain more fully the sense of a scar that has been left on man? How is man left scarred by the fall?
Well, it's since Adam and Eve transgressed and are now full of sin, that's been passed on through generations, and we cannot avoid it. We're always going to have sin, and we have adopted that from our ancestors. And sin affects us very deeply in our lives. So I would say it's more of a scar, because it's like, it's an imprint that's going to be always there until you die.
Thank you very much. Other questions?
Yes, Josh?
Really enjoyed your paper, thank you. So let's see if I can figure out how to say this. So you have like the story of the Garden of Eden and the fall of man, right? Kind of being the entire basis of everything that we know. So when God placed, the tree into the Garden of Eden, the option, we look at that as God giving us the ability to choose, free will, right? So I was just wondering, is evil, in contrast to good, the only way like good can really exist? Like, must Satan exist in order for God to be good? Or like, because we argue that free will means being able to choose evil. If God hadn't given that choice, would we still have free will even if we could choose everything that was good? Like, does something to be good, does it have to have something evil to contrast it with?
I don't think so. God is good and righteous, and he created Satan, so there was good before even evil happened.
Oh, is that created Satan?
So, well, where did Satan come from? God had to create him. So there was a perfect being and good being before evil entered the world. Evil is just is something opposite of God, because God is good and perfect. So anything opposing God would be evil.
Okay, I guess I'm just wondering, since we look at free will, in the way that we can see it, with kind of every good thing having kind of an evil counterpart. I'm wondering, if God doesn't need evil, why would he give us that option?
So we're not robots. He gives us a choice so we can freely choose to love him. If he just forced us into only having one choice of only following him, then we'd be more like robots, more controlled, I guess. Instead, he gives us the free will choice to allow us to choose him if we truly desire it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Kent?
So you say, a man in pursuit of false salvation can create more problems for himself than the wearisome journey he is already stuck with, and then you give the tale of Palamon and Arcady. And you say, false and idolized salvation will rather produce a life of misery and unhappiness, and ultimately life opposite to salvation itself. So would it be better to not pursue it at all, as opposed to pursuing that, a false sense of salvation or happiness?
That's a good question. I think I think there's no way for us to stop desiring those things. So, I mean, you won't be able to help it in the first place. Think about that. Yeah, I guess they can't help themselves. It's a desire left from the memory of how they were created. So they just can't help how they can't help their desire to obtain a perfection. So I think there's no way you can help not pursuing those things. As long as you made your peace with God, then you have the right perspective in life. You're on the right path.
So then the only right answer would be make peace with God.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I don't know if this is kind of related to what Mr. H and Kent were saying, but you have something that you said in the paper. You said, but in reality, the pursuit of constant improvement is a contradiction to reason. So I was wondering if it's a contradiction to reason, to consistently try to improve yourself, kind of, is there any point to doing that at all? Or should you just say, I have salvation in God, and I don't need to constantly improve myself because I'm never going to attain that. I'm never going to be perfect. So what's the point?
Well, you can try to do that, but it's not going to really work out very well. Like I said, it's an innate desire in man to always want to search for perfection, a greatness. So you can try to stop thinking about such things, like maybe deaden your brain by drugs or alcohol, but in reality, you're still pursuing a happiness, a perfection, a peace of mind. So even if you had that thought of why even pursue these things, you can't help it. You have to. You're always going to inevitably pursue them.
Thank you.
So in Colossians, there's a Bible verse that talks about working in all that you do. Work at it as hard as you can for the glory of the Lord. So kind of bouncing off Mr. H, you could just explain your thoughts on. We're all given different gifts, whether it's someone that's been given hands that can create wonderful things, or you and Charlotte both, you're amazing at roller hockey. Just the idea that we are, through hard work, we're glorifying the Lord, and people can see that Christians can work really hard and obtain amazing things through His guidance and His gifts that He's given you, but balancing that with the idea of salvation and Him being the most important thing. So Him being the most important thing, but still working hard and chasing greatness. Would you comment on how you balance all that?
Oh. I believe that your focus should be on making your peace with God. You better settle that first, because life can be short. So I would put the more emphasis on making your peace with God. And I say, by making your peace with God, you do glorify God. Because His creation is desiring and aligning themselves with His plan, and put themselves in harmony with His plan, being restored back to His image, and there's no conflict there. That's very glorifying to God. Having what you created is now fixed and and enjoying being in harmony with him. So I do think it's good to not go off the deep end and start pursuing evil things. So you do need a balance of making sure you are loving, you are kind, you're honest, and all those good virtues. But the focus should be on making your peace with God first.
I was just kind of asking you to speculate on what sort of person may be the closest to coming to God. There do seem to be some people that are just full of ambitions, things that they want, that they're trying to get. Whether it be they want to get rich, or they want to get married, or they want to get the Stanley Cup, or they want to become the president of the United States. There's some people that are always full of stuff like that, and other people appear to just be quite happy to sit on their porch and smoke their pipe, and in a sense, worldly contentment. They just don't have drives for other things. In the way that you've described things, that all these sort of desires that we have for happiness as being a sort of confused pursuit of God, would you say those people that are just full of all these different ambitions are perhaps in a place where they are ready to know God? Because in a sense, they've already seeking Him in a confused way, whereas the person who's just doesn't want anything may have kind of turned off in a way that shows maybe they don't desire God.
Yeah, I would think those who are more ambitious do have a better chance of finding God and succeeding in that because of their ambitions. So if they come to know God, they're ambitious to wanting to do what He has planned for them. Those who are more lukewarm, I would say, are not as close of making their peace with God because, like you said, they have kind of turned off. They don't really care. They don't really have anything that they like striving after.
Okay. Other questions?
You've been talking, sorry, this is kind of a slurry of a whole bunch of other questions that have just kind of been compiling in my brain. But you've been talking about the importance to make peace with God first in your life, and then, you can't help but, desire to do hobbies and make yourself better. But I was just kind of wondering where you would draw the line between, wanting to make yourself better after making peace with God, and when that flips from, just wanting to make yourself better to more of your focus. And even if you can fully make your peace with God on earth, or if that's something that you just kind of have to wait on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I understand. So where do I draw the line, or?
Yeah, like, you say that you have to make peace with God, but then, you can't really help but want to pursue other
Yes.
things. But when does that pursuit flip? And if it can flip from making peace with God to where you flip to having idols in your life, which disrupts the peace with God, can you even make true peace with God on earth?
Okay. Like a lot of it comes down to your humility. If you are pursuing greatness and are very prideful, then you're gonna flip to the other side and probably make more of idols. But if you keep a humble mind and know where your standing is with God, then I would say you are on a right path to keeping your peace with God. And I do think you can make your peace with God on this earth. If you believe, like it says in the Bible, if you believe in the death and resurrection of Christ and receive the Holy Spirit, you now don't have any condemnation. So you don't have it on this earth. You still sin, but He promises you that your name is in the book of life and you will be restored back to your original image. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. And kind of jumping off that
Sorry.
again. No. Even for those who aren't prideful in the pursuit of other interests and hobbies and things like that, if it's occupying the majority of their time, but they still believe in the Word of God and are still faithful to the Word of God, wouldn't the place that holds the most time in their life ultimately be their main focus? Even if it's, even if you aren't pridefully pursuing it for your own glory, you're just pursuing it out of interest and pursuing it out of more knowledge and more wisdom and more education that you can get from it. If it's taking up the majority of your time, is it, still a godly thing to do to, make yourself better?
Yeah, that's a good point. You do want to make sure you're giving God most of your time, because that's where the importance lies. I do think if you pursue hobbies to more of an extent of God, you can easily lose focus of what's important in God. So I think there is a balance, and I think one should put more of their time in towards doing believing in God and doing what He asks, and just having a relationship with God. You need to pursue more of that and put more importance in that than worldly things.
Thank you.
Yes, Tyler?
When you make your peace with God, should you just give up trying hard for certain objects like honor or love? Should you just stop pursuing the things wholeheartedly once you make your peace with God?
I think I kind of answered this question a little bit before. So once you make your peace with God, should you stop pursuing those things?
Wholeheartedly, like trying your hardest for some of those things.
I would say yes, you should probably stop. Like, if that's their focus, then I would say you need to
I wasn't saying
realign
it
your
was like
focus.
once you make your peace with God. So you already have your peace with God, so I was just wondering, you should stop.
I would say you don't have to stop all the way, but just balance it. So most of your focus is on pursuing a relationship with God, doing what He's asked, doing what's part of His plan. That should be your main focus. So if pursuing wholeheartedly on stuff like honor or just worldly pursuits, if that's been taking up most of your time and most of your focus, and that's where you put the importance on, then I would say you need to limit how much you do that. Yes, Josh.
So I just have one more question. Kind of, this has been somewhat alluded to, kind of trying to balance, things in this life with, things of God. But I'm going to take it to its extreme. So in the Garden of Eden, we look at Adam and Eve as perfect, right? Before they had really done much, they just hadn't sinned yet, right? They hadn't made super difficult decisions or had to do anything super difficult. It was just they hadn't sinned, therefore they were perfect. So do you think, throughout the Bible, it kind of seems to be just trying to sin, as little as possible. So do you think that we should be really promoting kind of the attitude of, monks who go into a cave and just read the Bible all day and try not to sin? Wouldn't that be logically the best thing that we as Christians could be doing? Instead of, why are we even trying with all this worldly stuff if it's pointless? Shouldn't we just go sit down and read the Bible?
That's a good point. Well, like I kind of briefly mentioned, you won't be able to help it, because it's a desire to seek for what is great. But there's a lot to be learned from sinning. I know it sounds weird. Don't go out and just sin so you can learn from it. But what if you do sin, and which you are inevitably going to, you learn a lot from the faults and the problems that you do, So I think there's value that can be found even in making mistakes and sinning. So I don't think it's always good to put your focus solely on, you can learn a lot by putting your focus solely on what is great, but you can also enrich it and build more knowledge by also learning from your mistakes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bradley.